When I was in my 70s, I did a little hobby trucking up in northern Utah. I mostly hauled cars from a wrecking yard in Orem to a wrecking yard in Ogden. I had a purpose-built step deck trailer that I could haul 5 cars on. I pulled this trailer with a 1992 Ford Aeromax tractor with 13 speed and a 3406 mechanical cat motor. I ran the truck off and on for about 18 to 20 years, making little repairs along the way. There were lots of disconnected wires under the hood that had been cut and replaced, and there was a liberal clearing of grease on parts of the motor, airlines, and wires. Normally, the truck ran great. When I first got it, I had the International Truck Dealership in Las Vegas put it on their dyno to make sure it was okay before I sunk money to get it roadworthy. Well, you could easily spend $8,000 just to buy tires. The mechanic at the dealership told me that it was one of the strongest 4 1/4 cats he had tested. Over the years driving it proved that to be true. I could run down the highway in the middle of the pack with a heavy load. I passed many more trucks than passed me. In September 2022, my cousin Lee asked me if I could haul some 24-inch cement pipe from Geneva Pipe in Salt Lake City to his farm in Beaver, Utah. The round trip was 400 miles with lots of steep grades. These pipes weighed 2,400 pounds each, and they loaded 19 of them on my step deck trailer, 3 on the under 10-foot top deck, and the rest in 2 layers on the bottom deck. After loading up one Tuesday, I went off toward Beaver. Things went fine until I pulled off the highway in Fillmore, Utah to get diesel fuel. I had stopped very quickly on the on-ramp, but I did not crash. However, one of the pipes on the top deck pulled loose from the strap, and the inertia rolled it off the deck. It came to rest on the frame of my truck between the cab and the trailer. It effectively made it so I could not turn more than about 9 degrees before binding up. I nursed the truck around and parked it in the road in front of the truck stop. Oh boy, what could I do? How in the world could I lift some concrete pipe weighing more than a ton back up to the top deck of the trailer? As I thought of options, I decided to see if there was a big uh, wrecker available. Consulting my electronic phone book, I called the local tow company that had a big wrecker available. Within 30 minutes, he came to my location. Within about 90 minutes, he had used his boom to pick the pipe up and restore it to his perch on my top deck. During the procedure, we noticed I had a nail in one of my rear drivers, and we could hear the air hissing out. I fueled up and went across the highway to another truck stop to get the tire repaired. There was a 4-hour wait until it was my turn. They took my phone number and told me I could wait out front in my sleeper. They would call me when they were available. I climbed to the bunk to snooze a little, knowing that if it called, it would wake me up. I woke up around midnight. When I went into the shop to check my place in line, the shift had changed. The new shift seemed a little lost, but finally found my repair ticket and told me he could get right on it. An hour and a half later, I headed up the highway toward Beaver. My truck was running strong, even with all that weight. You can calculate the gross weight if I tell you truck and trailer weighed 36,000 pounds with no load. After about 5 or 10 miles out of Fillmore, the engine mysteriously died. I was cruising at about 70 miles an hour. The oil pressure was fine, coolant temperature was normal, barometer temperature was good, and the alternator was charging 14 volts. I had filled the tanks and all systems were go. There was no reason for the motor to die. It would turn over fine, just not start. I pulled off the side of the road and rolled to a stop. I put on my headlamp and went spelunking. I cracked open the hood and started examining, visually, both sides of the motor. There were no leaks or broken airlines. I pumped the manual fuel pump a few strokes and it seemed fine. I cracked open a plug on the side of the fuel filter housing and no spring jumped out. As I cranked the motor, no fuel came out either. That was a bad sign. Big trucks have 2 fuel pumps. One is the high-pressure injection pump that supplies high-pressure fuel to the injectors. There's another pump that I call a lift pump that pumps fuel from the tank to the fuel filter just before the injector pump. The injector pump then grabs the diesel and rams it into the injectors that squirt diesel into the cylinders. I guessed that my fuel filters might be clogged because I hadn't replaced them in a timely manner. Since it was the middle of the night, I was reluctant to call anybody to get their advice. I then remembered a mechanic I had used that worked night shift at 7-Eleven up in Orem and as a mechanic during the day. I called him and asked him if he thought it was a bad lift pump or clogged fuel filters. He said he would search for possibilities with his electronic information device and try to figure it out. I also used the device to research possible problems with the fuel delivery system for 3406 mechanical cat motor. During my research on a mechanics forum discussing fuel delivery problems, someone with a Cummins motor told of a fuel shutoff solenoid that turned his motor off when there was a problem with sensors. I prayed for an answer out there alongside the highway and then did more research. I went under the truck with a spotlight to look for a lift pump and re-examined the engine compartment for anything that looked recently broken or out of place. No luck. I talked to the mechanic again, and he agreed to buy replacement fuel filters and head to the truck when he got off work. I then tucked myself in with another fervent prayer and went to sleep, the truck rocking every time another truck zoomed by on the highway. Next morning, I woke up several times but stayed in bed because it was raining and I knew the mechanic didn't have time to arrive. Finally, at 10 a.m., it stopped raining, and I expected help any time. Later, I found out my mechanic got into his car, leaned his head back to rest for a minute after work, and passed out. He never woke up until I called him later. I went out and reviewed the engine compartment one more time during daylight to check for anything damaged or broken. At a different angle, I noticed a greasy old cat yellow wire that seemed to stop behind a wire loom. I went and got a baby fresh wipe, a trucker's best friend, to grab and wiggle the wire. It seemed to be one of many long-standing broken wires found floating in the engine compartment. As I wiped the grease off with a baby wipe to get a better look, I tried to find the location it had connected to. I spotted a solenoid-looking thing near the injection pump that had two terminals, one with wires connected and one without. The length of the broken wire seemed about right to connect to the blank terminal. I snipped off the blob of plastic on the end and stripped the wire. I crimped the loop wire end on it, took the nut off the terminal, and slipped the loop on. I retightened the nut and figured, what could it hurt? I jumped in, turned the key, and pushed the starter, and va-va-voom, that old cat started purring. While it warmed up, I climbed back in the sleeper for a prayer of thanks 2 or 3 times. Oh, those thanks prayers are ones with a higher purpose and are highly recommended.